Great. So welcome everyone to the Cranbrook History Centre's first community lecture webinar. We wish we were hosting you in our beautiful Royal Alexandra Hall, but we thought it was still important to continue these lectures as best we could. We are very pleased to have Gordon Sheridan with us this evening. My name is Honor Neve. I'm the Chief Curator at the Cranbrook History Centre, and I will be your host for this webinar. So just a few housekeeping notes before we get started. First off, if you're reading this, you're doing wonderful. And if you can hear me, even better. Throughout the webinar, you can use the chat feature to ask questions or make comments. I'll be monitoring that from the background. We really want to make this as interactive as possible. So even though we can't see you, if you wish to ask a question, just let us know in the chat box and I can unmute you so you can ask Gordon a question. Hopefully your mics are all on and working and we can make that happen. If you have any problems, please use the chat feature to communicate directly with the host and I will do my very best to help you. And I think that's everything. If anyone has any questions, let me know before we get started. Looks like we're all good. So I'm going to hand it over to you, Gordon. Oh, you got to unmute yourself, though.
Okay, thank you. And we're back. Just going to share my presentation here. Can you see that?
We're all good, Gordon. I can see it.
Sorry, I'm just missing the chat area. Okay, we're all good. Okay, welcome. Thank you for coming, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Gordon Sheridan. I am I'm a local, but a new local. I have lived in Cranbrook for about 3 years now, moving here from Hamilton, Ontario. And can I just say that I moved here because I love this place. I haven't regretted it in the 3 years I've been here. Love being here. My family loves being here, and we're very happy. The only thing we miss is the people we left behind, but that's unavoidable. Before I begin, I'd really like to thank the Cranbrook History Centre and Honor for asking me to do this. I was very happy to be asked and proud to be part of this great series. I hope you show up for more of them. They're a great resource that we should be in the hall doing it, but of course that's not possible. So this is the best we can do. And if anything goes wrong, please understand this is my first Zoom webinar. Already proven myself. Okay, a little bit about me. I was an educator for 17 years. I worked as an English teacher predominantly because that's my background. But I also taught history, geography, and eventually media. The school I worked at did not have a media department at the time, so I built it from the ground up. I was the head media teacher, and it was a great experience. The building of the courses, the students I taught. It was a program that was set up for things like media analysis, and ultimately also there was courses on how to make film. So I would send a bunch of teenagers out into the Hamilton area with cameras, and very proud of some of the stuff they turned out. Still have it saved to today on a hard drive. Very happy about that. Now here in Cranbrook, my family owns and operates a small business called The Rep, where we show classic and cult movies. It is of course suspended during these strange and uncertain times, but we're hoping that they'll end soon, and we'll be back to showing movies. You can find us on Facebook, and what's interesting about our company is that we actually take suggestions. If you want to see something on the big screen, we will try to make it happen. So basically, I've been a media enthusiast my entire life, a bit of a film aficionado, film history, armchair film historian, which is why Honor asked me in the first place to do this. But all that's the professional me, the personal side of me is, as far as media is concerned, is I like to look for the inspiration rather than the creator. So for example, there I would say, if you consider Elvis the creator of rock and roll, well, you have to go a little bit further back in history to see the other people who contributed, which ultimately led to Elvis being the inventor and king of rock and roll. His inspirations, such as blues and jazz, even country's mixed in there a little bit. This is no different in film. As a student of film and history, I've enjoyed film my entire life, and feel that my understanding has been enhanced by discovering its roots. So tonight we're going to talk about those roots as they are concerned with another very important invention in history, which of course is the steam locomotive, or which we commonly call the train now, and of course it's not run by steam anymore. So welcome, and thank you for joining me. I appreciate you being here. Here is my title card. Sorry, just trying to get rid of those dots. A little glitchy, but it'll do. Okay, so here we are, and tonight we are going to be examining both of these technologies individually, and then speaking about the importance of where they collide in history. I've chosen as my background here a very important part of train and film history, which we're going to be seeing next. So this is, as I said, this is, in my opinion, and many film scholars, the most important point of history where train and film technology collide. And we'll talk about it for a few reasons after I show you the video. It is, you can see the title here. I'm not going to try to pronounce it because even my son laughed at me, who goes to TM Roberts for French immersion, even if he laughed at my pronunciation when I tried. So let's just go straight to the video and talk about it after. And that's it. Not very exciting. However, it holds a very special place, an important point in film history for many reasons. First of all, it was created by the Lumiere Brothers, Auguste and Louis Lumiere, who were film pioneers at the end of the 19th century and the beginning of the 20th century. And why this clip is so important is because it created many myths that a lot of people still believe today about this clip. First of all, many people believe that it is the first film ever shown to a large audience. Unfortunately, that turned out to be incorrect. The Lumiere brothers were the first filmmakers to ever show films to a large audience, but this came on the second night, not the first night. So it wasn't the first one. Furthermore, it is a myth in film history that the biggest myth, that when the train came towards the screen, you have to imagine you're watching it on a computer screen that would be much bigger on the big screen in real life, that people actually got up and ran out of the theater because they were afraid, because they'd never seen a motion picture before. They'd never seen something larger than life. And this, as I said, it makes a great story. I personally wish it was true, but it turns out not to be true. They did make the audience nervous. That is absolutely true. They did make the audience nervous, but it did not go down the way that the myth normally says. So it makes a great story, but it's still a great story if you know the rest. So here's the rest. Well, it's not true that they ran out of the theater. This was the first film in history to prove that film could have a psychological effect on us, because it did make the audience nervous. But my personal belief is that it didn't make the audience nervous because they thought the train was going to come through the wall, as stated, or if some people state that people thought that they were inside of a giant camera obscura, which is a modern day pinhole camera we'll be talking about later, and that the image was real and that the train was coming towards them. I honestly think that because this is one of the first films ever displayed in history to a large audience, that it made them nervous because they didn't know the language of film. We are born with the language of film. Film is all around, media is all around us. We understand things like the jump cut, the superimposition, the transition, etc., the wipe. All of these things we know from watching film all of our lives. But back then they had to learn these things. They were seeing it for the first time. So it was not something that was in their social consciousness. Furthermore, they also were probably a little unnerved by seeing such a large image moving. I'm sure you're aware, images, especially on screens, can be very detrimental to certain people. There's a great movie I love called A Field in England, and I wish I could show it to a friend of mine, but she can't watch it because it literally makes her feel sick because it's choppy and it's got stroboscopic effects in it and so on. As I was saying, the language of film is common to us now, but back then you had to interpret that language for the first time. I honestly think that's where their confusion and disorientation comes from, and that it's a great story, but unfortunately not true. So that's the moment in history where film and trains collided, pun decidedly unintended, and we're going to move on to learning about the history of trains, the history of movies, and then bring them back together for my thesis in the end. So here is a working model of a glass steam engine. It shows the basic principles in a couple seconds. I'll start the video. As you can see here, we've got a heat source. We've got the resource, water, which is going to be turned into steam. It travels down these pipes, creates pressure, which moves the piston, and then the piston moves the flywheel. Very common style of steam engine. What I found interesting about this one when I found it was none of these things use seals. This is all fitted glass, which must have been incredibly difficult to do. Anyway, here's the video. Okay, so simple principles: heat, water, steam, pressure, which shows that human progress is mostly tied to our relationship with the elements. If we can harness our resources, we can create new technology, create more efficient energy, and advance. It's a common thing throughout history, as I'm sure you're aware, and we're going to be looking at that a lot tonight. So most people think that the steam engine was invented in the Industrial Revolution. And the steam engine actually has roots that go back over 2,000 years to this man here, Hero of Alexandria, who was described as the Tony Stark of his day. So I guess it's appropriate that his name is Hero. He created this model. As you can see, it's not much different from the previous glass one you just saw. You've got places to put the water in, the reservoir, the heat source, piston, which turns the flywheel. And you would think that had we perfected the technology back then, our world might have been a lot different today. We would have, well, about a 1600-year jump on technology. But unfortunately, it was never perfected. And we had to wait for a little over 1,000 years before we did get around to perfecting it. So when it was perfected and put into use in the 19th century, the credit goes to this man here, William Murdoch. He has nothing to do with the Murdoch mysteries. That's just a coincidence. He's not being portrayed in that television show. Good Canadian show, by the way. And he created the first road locomotive in 1784. And when I say road locomotive, you're probably thinking, wait, aren't we talking about steam trains? And no, we're not talking about trains yet. What I want to show with this example, and the next one actually, is that technology is never just created by one person in one place. Well, okay, maybe never is a strong word, but usually technology is not created by one person in one place. Technology is unlocked by the technology we've unlocked in the past, and it is created by inventors in many places at many times. So you have concurrent inventions happening. And William Murdoch here created the road locomotive. As you can see, very simple. You got the piston here, which moves everything up and down, which turns the wheels. And obviously, it never took off. We didn't use road locomotives as a regular point of transportation until the gasoline engine was created by Henry Ford in the 20th century. And to back up my points, I just want to show you this next road locomotive created by this man, John FITCH. It was created probably around the same time, but like so many things in history, it got lost, and it wasn't found until 1825 in his daughter's attic. So here's his road locomotive, lost to history. Sorry, I said 1825 and it's 1849. And once again, you could see all the same principles at work. You could also see with the wheels that it was designed to run on tracks, but like a streetcar is supposed to be on the street. And then the train itself, the first steam locomotive was not created till a little while after that by this man, Richard Trevithick. He created the first steam freighter. Notice I don't say train, I say freighter, and that's because this only had industrial applications. There was no passenger trains at the time. This device of his, which is pictured here, is used for transportation of goods, specifically at that time, coal and iron, which were the two major resources of the Industrial Revolution and propelled the Industrial Revolution. One of the reasons that England was such a progressive place during that time was because it had both of those resources in great quantities, which allowed them to surpass many places in the world that might not have had those resources. So the first steam freighter is created by Richard Trevithick, but the first steam locomotive, so the first steam train, was created by this man, George Stephenson. And it was in the 19th century that it was created. His train appropriately was called the Locomotion. And I bet a bunch of you of a certain age, a song just popped into your head. So here it is, the original train. You can see it was made out of, or at least got a wood veneer on it. This is the museum it's in today as part of an exhibit. It's a very important piece of history because the train had so many applications that changed society, but we'll get to that. Okay, this is the first public railway in the world, the Stockton-Darlington Railway, obviously in the United Kingdom. We could see here how there was these black parts, the road, and then the red is where the train expanded the area that the English could get to, so that they could expand their business. They could move from city to city. It was a transportation revolution. That's really what it was. And the transportation revolution also includes, I can't discount it even though it's not part of my topic, the steam boat, which preceded the steam train and was created by this man, Robert Fulton. And if you look at this picture, you probably would guess he invented the quoif as well. So here is his first steamboat, the Clermont, from 1807. So you could see it predates it. But as I said, I wanted to give you the full picture of, it was a transportation revolution. It opened up transportation for both people and goods to go faster than they ever had before. Previous to this, the fastest you could go in this world was by horse. So you are now maybe tripling your speed, certainly in a steamboat, able to cross bodies of water that you would not have been able to cross previous to that. We can't underestimate the importance of what this did for society. All history, the way I look at it, is evolution, which leads to us being the way we are today. And as far as transportation goes, besides obviously the Wright brothers in the 20th century, this was as good as it got back in the 19th century. And it was a game changer. It was incredible. Society changed so much because of this. Other examples in history that created revolutions, we can see here our ability to harness our elements. First, fire as primitive man, then gasoline, the gasoline combustion engine by Henry Ford in the early 20th century, and then later on in that same century, atomic energy, which mostly powers us today. So that's a very brief history of the steam engine and the steam locomotive. Now we're going to get to my real passion, which is cinema. So cinema is also very much like the train in the sense that it was not created by one person at one time in history. No matter what this man, Thomas Alva Edison, would like you to believe. You see, we look at this guy and we see pictures of him and we know all the inventions he made and we think, oh, he must be such a nice guy. He's an older gentleman. And he really wasn't. He hurt people. He stole patents. And well, I think my next slide will just explain that for me. He also is directly responsible for creating Hollywood. Once again, a myth, but I choose to believe it because it's so great. Might be true, might be not true, might be partially true, but here it is. Thomas Edison helped to invent Hollywood, and not because he was one of the contributors of the invention of the film projector. He created Hollywood because, and he was, you got to remember, he's a New York boy. He's an East Coast guy. So he was in New York and created a phenomenon on the other side of the country by being a bastard. The myth goes that other people in New York were using film technology, and Edison didn't like that. He believed that he should be getting money for something he patented. Notice I say he not created, but patented. He certainly contributed, but he did not create, as history would like us to believe. So those people who just happened to be, those people who just happened to be making films and using technology that probably wasn't even his anyway, were able to make these films and steal money out of his pocket as far as he was concerned, So what does nice Grandpa Thomas Edison do? How does he handle the situation? He gets in bed with the Italian mafia. The Italian mob goes to these people making movie. They were predominantly Jewish, and they tell them, leave New York or die. So they go to California. They get to California. It's sunny every day. Everybody's blonde and beautiful, and they say, hey, let's make some movies. And that is the myth of how Hollywood was invented. Like I said, I personally liked it so much, I like to believe it, and also because I'm not an Edison fan. Okay, so the whole point is that Edison contributed to film history, and now that film or projections in our society are ubiquitous. They're everywhere. They're a form of entertainment we can't escape. Screens are all around us. If you have a child, then you are well aware of this. So what is a projection? All film theory is based on light and shadow. So if you take shadow puppetry, which dates back to prehistory, then our ancestors technically made movies. Imagine a hunter and gatherer tribe. The hunters return from a successful mammoth kill, and they're telling their tribe about it by making shadow puppets on the wall. So they add a narrative to the light and shadow projection, thereby creating the first movie in history. But we're human beings, and we have a tendency to exaggerate, meaning they probably made the tusks a little bit bigger than they were in actual life. They probably gave it claws, which we all know they have flat elephant feet. And what do we have then? Boom, we got the first monster movie in history. I know, it's a bit of a stretch, but work with me, it's part of my theory. From here, we move thousands of years into the future to Central Asia in 2000 BCE, where we have shadowography, or what most people refer to as shadow puppets. So you have the same as the previous shadows we just saw. You have light being used to project an image onto a wall, and that image is supposed to be a narrative. So when light and shadows are recorded into a camera, it's recorded as information. The light is information you could see, or information in general, and shadow or dark parts are non-information. So the mixture of the two creates the images we see, whether it's a shadow on the wall or an image we see on a TV screen. It's all the same principle, which is why I'm going with this from the beginning as the evolution. So we go from 200 BCE and jump about 1,000 and a bit years to this man who we all know, Leonardo da Vinci. We know Leonardo da Vinci as an inventor, and as an inventor, he created a lot of things that are useful in the modern world. Unfortunately, some of the things he created, he was not able to build himself. So for example, the creator of the telescope is credited to a man named Hans Lippershey, a Dutch optician. And that makes sense that an optician would end up creating the telescope, because it works on the same principle as our eyes. It's got lenses in it, it's got focus, etc. But Leonardo da Vinci really deserves the credit for building the blueprints for the first telescope. And this is also true for the earliest camera in history that wasn't just shadows on a wall. This is called the camera obscura, which I mentioned earlier, or the pinhole camera. So Da Vinci came up with the principles of how to use this, but he never actually made a working diagram, or sorry, a working prototype. So here's the camera obscura. The light enters the hole, which is projected on the wall, and it is inverted, as you can see, but that's a common thing in the way our eyes work as well. So Leonardo da Vinci may have come up with the idea for this, but it wasn't invented until much later by this man, Johann Zahn. And now the camera obscura here is actually something we use as activities with children and making pinhole cameras. But Johann Zahn really gets the credit for creating the camera obscura and therefore the basic principles of how a camera will work. So after that, people started to realize what you could do with projections, and that spurred the creativity. People were trying to invent new things, and from this point in history till the film camera is invented in the late 19th century, it's just a series of inventions and evolution of those devices to get to where we are today. So the first one we're going to look at is magic lantern. Looks a little bit like a projector, film projector. But as you can see from these slides around here, what they would do is use very lightly painted transparent glass. And then, of course, this back here would contain the only light source at the time, fire, and it would project out the lens right here. So now we're talking about projecting the first image. This is also a very important forerunner to the film projector in the camera. So that in turn spurred on other evolution of further inventions. That one was created by this guy, Christian Huygens, and he was also Dutch. The magic lantern was largely used in Germany for what they called phantasmagoria shows. And phantasmagoria shows were where live actors would interact with these images projected, as you can see in this picture here. You can see this guy ready to pull out his sword. Like, people were actually afraid of these things, which may be also where the Lumiere Brothers myth got started. So these phantasmagoria shows would be shown to audiences, and it would just be a simple matter of projecting these shows and the actors reacting to them and working around them. And they even had mild versions of animation in them, such as you could have part of the image obscured with like, what's the word I'm looking for? Shutter. And then you could move the shutter to expand a person's stomach or make a balloon grow and stuff like that. So there was even early roots of animation in there. From the phantasmagoria show of the magic lantern, we go to the zoetrope. And the zoetrope was largely considered a child's toy, but it worked once again with the basic animation principle of classic animation being a picture you draw with another picture that's slightly different. Person's hand moves, or not if you, okay, I'm not even gonna bother. You get the idea. Here's the zoetrope in action.
All right, we have the zoetrope and some horse riding this time. So this is the cartoon inside, the zoetrope, and an optical animation toy, Victorian toy. Particularly nice looking one, this one. It would look just nice on the side. So let's take it for a spin. As you can see, it's like the horse is galloping. Now I spun this anti-clockwise, so I wonder what it would look like if we spun it clockwise. So as you can see, that's what it looks like in between the slits. So let's turn it clockwise now. Yeah, it looks a lot better, doesn't it? Of course, looks like it's going faster. So there's definitely a right or wrong way to spin it.
Okay, so from that you can see the basic animation principle of many pictures slightly different from each other, and the fact that you're looking through the slit means that your eye is deceived when the solid part of the zoetrope goes by, and it creates the illusion of movement. As you can see, that's not a very effective device. Your vision is constantly blocked by it, so the device evolved into the praxinoscope. So as you can see, the praxinoscope is a very similar a device, with the exception of, instead of looking through slits on the side, they added a mirror in the center, which was really genius. And again, this was used as a children's toy of the time period. You can see here that there's a strip inside of them and some of the strips in the background, so you could change it all the time. Here's the video clip of that.
The praxinoscope, invented in 1877, was the successor to the zoetrope. The praxinoscope replaces the zoetrope slits with angled mirrors placed in the center of the drum. Viewing the spinning animation reflecting off these circularly arranged mirrors breaks up the blur of color into an animation sequence. Viewing the images off mirrors rather than through small slits provided a brighter, clearer animation, which was especially important before the advent of the electric light bulb. This fine praxinoscope replica is handcrafted with solid wood and brass and includes 48 mostly historical animation sequences with a few modern examples. Come experience the magic and take home something ancient at ancientmagictoys.com.
Okay, so I think you can see the evolution there, in that you got a much clearer image. Not great because you're looking at angled mirrors, but eventually we moved forward into the zoopraxiscope, which was basically adding a projector to the praxinoscope.
Okay, so this machine, Julie has pressed the green button. This thing will turn red, and then the motion picture will start after this is playing. But yeah, just do that. The horse is moving. It's called a horse in motion. Yeah, using this machine.
Okay, the other thing you can see from that is this is also prior to the advent of, or the invention of electricity, so everything was hand cranked. Back in my hometown of Hamilton, we had a large Royal Botanical Gardens, and they had an exhibit there where you actually, it was a dinosaur exhibit, and they had a machine that you could look through the viewfinder and see a dinosaur old movie but you had to crank the handle, which of course means you can crank it faster and make it go faster. You can crank it slower, make it go slower. You can crank it backwards and make it go backwards. From the zoopraxinoscope, we finally moved to that bastard Edison's invention, the kinetoscope. This invention could only be made possible with the invention of something else, and the thing I'm talking about is not a device, it's actually emulsion. When emulsion was invented, you could finally create flexible film, and that's what Edison's kinetoscope used. I have an example here. I don't want to talk through the videos because I don't want to compete with the sound, but I will, oh, you know what? This one doesn't have sound. I will talk through it. We see the year 1894. Here's the outside. These kind of things would be at fairs, arcade fairways, things like that. Edison's latest invention, the kinetoscope, presents the serpentine dance. And this would have been Girls Gone Wild, Too Hot for TV edition back in the day. That serpentine dance. But here we are looking in the machine to see how it works. So you've got the lens with the viewfinder with the lens. We go inside and we can see here film being transferred underneath. There's a light source pointing up, and therefore you could pass by picture after picture after picture, very much like animation, and get a moving picture, a film. In a second, it's going to go to the outside and show you exactly how long one of these films was. And while I'm here, oops, sorry, I didn't mean to start it over. I just spelt it wrong. How embarrassing. Okay, so Edison had these things all over the place. And as I said, he felt that this was his technology and that no one else should be using it unless they paid him. Then we finally get to the cinematograph. The cinematograph is the invention of the Lumiere Brothers mentioned earlier. If you know French, then Lumiere translates to light. So it's very appropriate that these two brothers happen to be the ones who invented the cinematograph. This was a film camera that had two functions. It could both project and capture a film. So you captured the film by running the film through it the first time. You switched over the components and then you played the film and it projected out the light source, and voila, you had a film. This is exactly the, not this, but this is one of the devices that the Lumiere brothers would have used for their early exhibitions in Paris. This is ultimately the forerunner to the film camera. This is what we owe everything to movies today. I threw in this one just because it's too good not to throw in. This is the CHROMOPHOTOGRAPHIC gun. And you can see how it works here. It shoots, which is where we get the terminology shoot a film in our language, in our vernacular. But obviously it didn't shoot bullets, it shot pictures. It could shoot 6 frames a second. And you can see it in use here. You had a viewfinder that you look through, and there was a lens at the end here. The film was wound up in here and recorded. Always kept in darkness, of course, because to overexpose it would ruin it. And this was the invention of another Frenchman, Etienne Jules Marie. He was known for shooting rabbits with this gun. And he would, as I said, get 6 frames a second. So in those 6 frames, you would get 6 different pictures of a very slowly moving rabbit. And other times in history, we used it to record horses. There's a famous film history story about 2 guys who bet whether a horse's 4 feet ever left the ground and they were in free fall, or whether there was always 2 feet on the ground at one time. And it wasn't until the invention of this chromophotographic gun that we could actually settle the bet. And there's a very famous film, which I don't have in this lecture. I'm just winging it here because it springs to mind, called Sally Gardner Rides. And it's a woman jockey on a horse, which proves that, yes, indeed, all 4 feet of the horse do leave the ground at one point. There's a bet about it. I think it was something like $10,000, which back in the late 19th century must have been like $1 million. Yeah, I don't know how the guy who lost paid it, but it's a great story in history. And because it's such an important film in history, it is actually encoded into some people's DNAs. And I don't mean that naturally. I mean, people have had it encoded into their DNAs. DNA is just information, and we're doing great things with science these days. A couple scientists encoded that film into their DNA. I wonder what the side effects are going to be. Anyway, here we are. With the invention of the film camera, moving into the 20th century, things just picked up from there. And the film camera allowed for directors, people who were going to be able to take a story and, using the language of cinema, present it on the screen for people to enjoy. I've included some of my favorites from the early part of the 20th century here. Up in the left corner, we have Fritz Lang, probably one of my favorite directors of all time, known for many of his movies, but most notably Metropolis, pictured here. Then you have Busby Berkeley, who, I wish the picture was better, but you know those swimming pool scenes where all the women come together into these big kaleidoscope patterns? That's Busby Berkeley. So great choreographer. F.W. Murnau, one of the first horror movie directors, and his famous film Nosferatu. Interestingly enough, Nosferatu was actually supposed to be Dracula, and Bram Stoker would not give F.W. Murnau the rights to Dracula. So they just changed the name and created Nosferatu, which is of course a ancient German name for a vampire. And then James Whale over here, another tragic figure in film history. He's known for the original Frankenstein and my favorite, The Bride of Frankenstein, pictured here with Boris Karloff and Elsa Lanchester. Okay, so that's a brief, very brief history of film. So we move into finally part 3, my analysis, trains and cinema, with my thesis of this whole piece, which is such. Both the steam locomotive and the film projector are products of thousands of years of evolution, but were destined to collide in the 19th century, each creating their own societal revolutions, which propagated the success and expansion of the other's industries. So as I've been saying throughout this whole thing, both of them were created by many people over thousands of years, and no one person can claim to be the sole inventor of either of them. It was people standing on the shoulders of other people, standing on the shoulders of other people, and we call it human progress. This happens a lot, and unfortunately, we like simple versions of history, and we say Thomas Edison invented the film camera, despite the fact that it's not accurate whatsoever. Moving on, it provided a relevant and sensational topic for directors to point their film cameras at, thereby cementing the steam locomotive in society's subconscious as the predominant mode of transportation. Film has a certain power to change society. For example, the wedding ring. What rock is used, what gem or stone is used for the wedding ring? Obviously the diamond. Well, that was an invention of Hollywood, and it was cleverly used by the diamond industry. They purposefully used the film industry to perpetuate this myth that if you're going to propose, you had to use a diamond. Prior to that, look at things like the Irish engagement band, which has hands and a heart on it. It doesn't have to necessarily be a diamond because it's not tradition, and the film industry made it a tradition. So whenever a person was going to engage in a movie, the diamond industry was right there to say, here's a ring for your film, please use it. And literally change society. How many people just naturally run out and buy a diamond as, well, that's what you do. That's tradition. Well, it's tradition, but it's tradition that somebody used, tradition somebody created in order to become rich, like so many other things in this life. So the train was being seen on the big screen. We have the stunts of Buster Keaton, Charlie Chaplin, Georges Méliès, one of my favorite filmmakers from the late 19th century, known as the father of special effects, got into it by putting a camera on top of a train and watching a panorama as it went, thereby showing people the first time in history this perspective that they'd never seen before. So we're actually talking about changing people's perspectives, changing people's lives, what they think, how they think. All of this comes together with both the train and film in history at this time. It also proved and portrayed necessary social commentary in an ever-increasingly industrialized and mechanized environment, war and post-war societies. So at the time, of course, the Industrial Revolution going on, we had a lot of concern. It was the first time in history we had enough power as a species to actually seriously damage our environment. The Industrial Revolution which used coal, created a lot of ground pollution, water pollution, air pollution. The Industrial Revolution increased our power in so many ways, but it also was the beginning of us being able to destroy our environment around us, at least on a mass scale. So people were concerned about this. And then of course there was the wars. People were now able to see the war which was in another country. They were now able to see the atrocities. Instead of just reading it in the newspaper, which, as I'm sure you know, is very different, seeing versus hearing or reading. So I chose a quote here from Chaplin and his fantastic movie, The Great Dictator. If you've never seen it, I highly encourage you. It's a prince and pauper story where a guy who's supposed to be Adolf Hitler and his doppelganger twin, who is a poor barber, switch spots, and the barber has to become the dictator. And then he gives this amazing speech that I have to admit brought a tear to my eye the first time I watched it. It's just so powerful. Chaplin is such a good actor and an intelligent man. I have a lot of respect for him, unlike Edison. And here's his quote. "Our knowledge has made us cynical, our cleverness hard and unkind. We think too much and feel too little. More than machinery, we need humanity. More than cleverness, we need kindness and gentleness." And the point I would point to here is, of course, the more than machinery, we need humanity. And I used to show this in my media class I talked about earlier. And when I did, the students would leave my classroom, and if I was going on a break or out for my lunch, I would follow them out, and I'd have two students sitting side by side on a bench looking at their phones, and some of them would actually be texting each other while they're sitting next to each other. I don't get it, but I agree with this. More than machinery, we need humanity. Fantastic film. Please see it if you haven't. That, ladies and gentlemen, brings us close to our conclusion. But before I get there, as my French ancestors would say, before we get there, yes, I'm going to show you that bastard Edison's movie, The Great Train Robbery, because it is probably the second most important, next to the Lumiere Brothers, in train history. This one is interesting because it uses the language of film. You can see the date on it, 1903. You've got cut scenes, you've got jump cuts, you've got superimpositions. Interestingly enough, the color in this was created, because there is color in this one, was created by actually putting marker on the celluloid film and coloring each individual frame to create this color, which is why it's so inconsistent here. And most importantly, it also, like the Lumiere Brothers, proved that film could have a psychological effect on people, because it's the first time in history a gun is ever pointed right at the audience and fired. Despite the fact that it's Edison, I hope you enjoy. The end. Or as a better way to say the end in film, fade to black. Thank you for coming, ladies and gentlemen. I really appreciate your support. I know that the Cranbrook History Centre also appreciates your support, and I would highly encourage you to check out further webinars in the future. Hopefully we'll be back in the Alexandria Hall real soon. Please check out the Rep. We've got a Facebook page. It's just the Rep. On Instagram, Cranbrook Repertoire. If you are a film fan, then this is the place to be. We are going to be showing classic and cult film. You're not going to be seeing the latest Star Wars or Marvel movie like down at the Cineplex. We're going to be showing some truly classic film that has not been on the big screen in a decade or more. Thank you very much. And are there any questions?
We have a few minutes for questions, so please let us know.
Happy to answer anything.
We still have all of our attendees, so I don't know if someone is just waiting to ask a question.
Okay, well, it was a lot to digest. I actually, as I said earlier, we really only just scratched the surface. In an hour, I could do a couple hours on just the train, and I could do days on film. So in an hour, we were very limited, but I hope you enjoyed it, and I hope you learned something. Also, I'm going to be, well, the honor's going to be sending out a link. I know there is a prodigious lack of Canadian content in this. Unfortunately, that's the history. And I encourage you to follow the link when you do get it. It's a Buster Keaton National Film Board of Canada short. It's about 24 minutes long, which is why I couldn't show it in this lecture. But it is actually Canadian, and it's a great classic silent film star, despite the fact that it's no longer silent at that time period. He's a much older gentleman than you're used to seeing him as. But still, classic, worthwhile, as most things from the National Film Board of Canada are. So please follow that link and enjoy that. Yeah, last call. Any questions?
After you leave the lecture, there will be a short survey, so please let us know what other topics you would like to hear about. We're always interested in hearing from you, what you guys want to see and hear. If you know a particular expert locally who would just love to come and talk to us, or if you're an expert in something, please get in touch. Great, I guess there are no more questions. So I am going to end the webinar.
Okay.
We have this recorded, so you may be seeing it up. Tell your friends they'd like to check it out.
Thank you all for coming.
Yeah. Thank you, Gordon.
Thank you.